Come gather round, people, wherever you roam, and admit that the waters around you have grown, and accept it that soon you'll be drenched to the bone. If your time to you is worth saving, then you better start swimming, or you'll sink like a stone, for the times they are a-changing.
Welcome to the Watchmen for Nixon podcast. I'm Joe.
I'm Garrett.
And this episode, we will be reviewing and discussing, of course, Watchmen Season 1, Episode 5, Little Fear of Lightning. Garrett, what were your first thoughts on watching this episode?
I thought this was one of their better episodes.
Agreed.
Definitely stronger. I think that you last week had prefaced that you were looking forward to this because it seems like it's a Looking Glass heavy episode, and it absolutely was.
Very much so.
I thought we learned a lot of things. Things that we probably had questions about that we got answered.
Yeah. A couple theories we had that turned out to be correct.
Yes,
as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then a couple new questions we probably have to ask ourselves as well.
Very true.
I will say one thing that's kind of interesting about this show is going into the first couple episodes, you really think it's going to be a Sister Night story. And although I would still maintain she is the main character, the last 2 or 3 episodes, though, specifically this last one, she is relegated to a side character. So it'll be interesting. I think next week we'll get back into her being the full, main spotlight there. But I think it was a strong episode. How about yourself?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. This is my favorite episode so far this season. So, as we discussed in previous episodes of our podcast, I'd mentioned that the pilot strongly, far and away, was my favorite episode thus far, up until this one. And it does have a lot to do. I'm a little bit biased. We've mentioned how both of us actually are kind of fans of Looking Glass, but we didn't know much about him until now. So at least I was kind of hesitant to say how much of his character I really kind of liked. And this episode went a long way to showing what his motivations are, where his heart lies, what he's contributing overall to the series. And now he's a bit of a foil to our main character through some coercion, which we'll get to that a little bit later, of course. But I thought it was a really strong episode. I think Looking Glass is one of the most compelling characters on this show, especially now that we do know his backstory and why it is that he's kind of in Tulsa doing what he is doing.
Question for you.
Yes.
Since he is the arguable stand-in for Rorschach, who do you like better? Rorschach from the film or Looking Glass from the TV series?
Looking Glass.
Really?
By quite a lot, actually. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think what they do with Looking Glass is, once again, a key word for us, if you will, is nuance. So, obviously, with Rorschach, you understand that he does go through trauma at a very young age that kind of shapes him to be the ruthless vigilante that he is. And you also have that moment in the film, too, where he kind of crosses the line. I don't want to say prior to that he was maybe a little more forgiving, but there's definitely a moment where he starts really showing no mercy whatsoever to these criminals as he's going out kind of exacting vigilante justice on them.
Well,
go ahead.
Well, I want to say one thing, and one thing we need to keep in mind from the original Laurie Blake, Silk Spectre 2, these guys weren't cops.
Correct.
Whereas the heroes, or not heroes really, but the masked people in this television series are cops.
Yes.
And so that is a slight difference that Rorschach was never a police officer.
Very true. And I think with Looking Glass, that's where you do get a little bit more of this nuance. He seems, obviously, we see from the opening moments of this episode, he's very clearly been through his own trauma. He was in New Jersey when the actual giant squid was dropped on New York, but he kind of avoided the most prominent effects of the psychic blast. He was able to at least be just outside of that. I don't know if this had to do with the mirrors. I'm trying to refresh my own memory on if you had to be looking at it, if how the psychic blast was actually kind of projected throughout the population, but clearly it does not impact him in the same way that it impacted.
No, and there were other survivors in the carnival.
There were, true.
There were
yes.
people that were definitely on the ground that were probably in agony and maybe dying, but they weren't dead yet because they were moving. There were a couple people standing up.
Yep, that's a good point.
So
very good point.
I'm assuming the glass helped him. Being inside probably helps,
Right.
But I don't know if there's probably a rhyme or reason why some people survived, some people didn't.
Yeah,
but
but,
let's talk that through. And
Yeah.
obviously, as always, what we do is we know that Adrian Veidt had a really important role to play in this episode.
Very
We
much
always
so.
cover him at the end because he is in his own timeline there, and he is kind of now in his own dimension, or he's in space. So we will cover him at the end of the episode. Let's just do. Can you give us a brief synopsis of this episode?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'll just kind of do this here off the top of my head. So
Go ahead.
We'll go through it here. But yeah, overall, this episode opens. We get a much younger look at Looking Glass, whose real name is Wade, if memory serves me correctly. So it looks like he is part of. Honestly, it reminded me of kind of Jehovah's Witness style group that's preaching about the end times. The end is nigh, essentially. So
Yes.
they're at this carnival. Once again, in New Jersey, he's left in a very vulnerable position at the time that this psychic blast occurs. So then we cut to the present day after we get this flashback sequence at the opening. And this is where we start to learn a lot more about Looking Glass. We understand that he is a leader of a group. And this is something I got wrong in the last episode.
Okay.
Quite wrong, as a matter of fact, just based on the preview. So before we'd seen this episode in its entirety, of course, I thought, just based on the little chant they were doing, it seemed more cult-like to me in that little snippet we got. Now that, in reality, we see this episode in full, he's actually trying to help other people, other survivors of this psychic blast. And we also learned that this psychic blast the effects of this blast can be transferred genetically to descendants of people that were actually present in New York when that occurred. And I have to imagine that that's going to come back in some capacity too. So anyway, we learned that he is, in fact, the leader of this, kind of recovery group, essentially, to help them talk through their grief and try to move past it. What we come to learn, of course, is that he himself has not really moved past it. So he lines his hat with reflective material, of course. He wears this hat so that he can block his mind from potential psychic blasts. He sleeps with his hood on. This was really depressing. We understand he does not have any friends, self-proclaimed by himself, saying that he doesn't really have a friend group he can turn to. Throughout this episode, we also get to see just a little bit more of how obsessed he is with the squid fall. So the what was it? Extra dimensional.
It's extra-dimensional security.
Security, yes, thank you. So he has these devices set up in his house and in his fallout shelter, his bunker, where he can monitor squid fall. And one of them malfunctions, which kind of has a pretty funny payoff at the end of the episode. It's a little bit sad, but kind of funny too. And the biggest thing, other than that, I would say that occurs during this episode is, of course, he now comes in direct contact with members of the 7th Cavalry. And he is led there under false pretenses, initially going out on a date with a woman that shows up at this help group. So they go out to a bar. As they are leaving the parking lot, she gets into a truck, and out of the back of the truck falls a head of lettuce. So he, of course, follows this vehicle, discovers that, this is actually where the 7th Cavalry is having their meetings. He discovers the mock-up church, which is actually inside of what looks like an old department store, an old mall of some kind, essentially. And the big reveal, they have a portal. The 7th Cavalry has a portal, and they are using this to experiment with a basketball to see where things kind of fall out in different locations. So clearly some big implications here. And one of the other biggest reveals, which is actually just confirming a theory of ours, is that Keen is, of course, involved in this, and he is kind of one of, if not the master conspirator behind this series of events. So the ultimatum that is given to Looking Glass, because he has since been captured, of course, the ultimatum that's given to him is that he can help along Laurie's investigation into Angela Abar's involvement with Will, and that she can be essentially removed from the picture, or if he does not agree to do so, then Keen is just going to send the 7th Cavalry after her entire family. So, of course, he agrees. It seems like we don't get him explicitly stating that he agrees, but by the end of the episode, he has let Angela follow a line of his questioning that leads to her being arrested. So we also get Veidt in there. We understand that Veidt is responsible for Robert Redford being elected, that he, of course, is the mastermind behind the squid attack on New York. And gosh, what's some other stray thoughts? Laurie bugged the cactus on Looking Glass's desk.
Which was great.
Which was great. Yeah, that scene where Laurie was talking about, hey, it's nothing personal. We're FBI. I thought that was kind of an interesting scene.
Yeah.
Sorry, just to wrap things up, at the very end, he goes to throw away, after learning the truth, that it's actually Veidt who was in charge of all of this, and it was essentially an elaborate hoax to try to bring people together to stop a nuclear war. He goes to throw away his sensory device that had been shipped to him, decides he changes his mind, picks it back up out of the trash can, and the 7th Cavalry pulls up and hops out of their van, and they are loaded for bear and ready to go after Looking Glass, and that is the end of our episode.
Okay. Pin that, because I want to talk about what we expect to happen in the next episode with that. Or the next time we see Looking Glass.
Sounds
Unless
good.
you think he dies. Let's go back to the Hoboken, New Jersey thing. So, or 11/2/1985, essentially. And he is trying to spread the word of God, their savior, obviously to prevent nuclear war with the Soviet Union. Mm-hmm. And he gets tricked to go into the fun house with all the mirrors, the looking glasses, if you will.
Yeah.
And gets stripped naked, and this lady takes off with his clothes. And, he does say he's not afraid of anything, which is fascinating to see where he came, where he was at prior to this event and where he's at now, because now he's afraid of almost everything, it seems like. So fear was a really interesting thing. And I think that's what Veidt said. It's more powerful than nuclear war is fear.
Yeah.
And, he's a direct victim of that. And, when this show was first coming out, this was a scene from the previews of the show itself in general, not just an episode, but the entire premise of the show previewed him coming out of the funhouse screaming. Mm-hmm. What do you think originally of that? When you first saw the preview, if you remember seeing it, do you have any ideas?
Gosh, at the time, I didn't know what to think of it. I will say I didn't think it was a flashback.
Okay.
So at the time, I had thought that it was something horrific happening in the present day of our series. So clearly, I was very wrong about that. That was actually the Ground Zero event, essentially.
Well, and it's interesting that they go to New Jersey, so they're not in New York,
correct,
but they're across the bay. And it's really interesting because I've questioned numerous times on this podcast, why are we in Tulsa?
Yeah.
Versus when everything's happened in New York City because of the comic book, why outside of the Tulsa race riots did Damon Lindelof say everything coalesces into Tulsa, Oklahoma? And I feel like there needs to be that answer. We still don't have that answer. But Wade himself from Tulsa, which I thought was a great kind of nuance to his character here. He's originally from Oklahoma. And to me, it provides a little bit more nuance to him because of that line he does a throwaway the other night or in the previous episode about Judd Crawford being a racist. He's just a white man from Oklahoma.
Oh, yeah.
And I just thought that was interesting because I don't think up to that point we had confirmed that Wade was from Oklahoma, I don't think. I could be wrong.
Good call. I don't remember if that is in the tank sequence with Laurie or not.
Right.
But I don't believe we necessarily knew that.
I'm not either. If you guys, can point me to where that happened, if it was prior to that, let me know. You can email us at aliensandcowboys@gmail.com. But let's talk about this squid monster. Did you think we were going to see the squid monster?
No, I didn't. This shot was really incredible. It was terrifying, but it was an incredible effects shot to see them pan away from where Wade was standing across the bay in New Jersey, and then you slowly see more and more destruction, and then finally just the full screen shot of what the squid monster looks like.
Right.
So, yeah, I did not think we would get that. No.
Okay. Now let's flash forward then to the present day. So interesting that he kind of has reminded me of the movie Signs.
Yes.
With the tinfoil wrapped around his head.
Right.
But obviously it lines his hat. And I don't think up to this point, though, we had known that his mask was of the same material for that purpose.
That's true. Reflectine.
Right.
Yeah.
We knew that his mask was... I always thought his mask was there because it went in with his pod that he goes into to question people.
Yeah.
I didn't think it would serve this type of purpose. So I think that confirms that is there for a reason. We do know why he has his fallout shelter.
Yep.
But he has a side job. He does product testing.
Yeah.
And I thought the first one was great because the first one shows a commercial trying to get people to move back to New York City. And they even bring in, it's Michael Imperioli is the actor. He's from the show Sopranos.
Oh, nice.
And he's there eating calamari, which I thought was even better since it's, the nuance of a squid monster. So he's got the marinara sauce, the lemon, the calamari, and they're trying to convince people to come back. And at the end of it, Looking Glass or Wade just basically says they're not moving back. I thought that was a pretty interesting side gig.
Yeah, agreed. And I think it's important too because it firmly establishes. I know that the tank scenes before when he's interrogating people confirms this, I guess, as well. But even in his day job, he can very accurately determine who's lying and who is not. So it kind of keeps reinforcing that notion. And I like how they all answered in that first focus group, yes, we'll move back to New York. And he's like, no, they're all lying. No way they're going to move back.
Could we at least speak to why these people all have 3 jobs?
Yeah, how do they balance all?
Yeah,
this?
Wade and Angela, at least these 2 have 3 jobs. I don't know what Red Scare would do for a second occupation. Maybe he drives Uber. So she has the bakery. She's a cop, and she's a vigilante. And Wade obviously is a cop. He's a vigilante, and he runs this product testing thing. Now, I guess you could make the argument they're not actual real vigilantes. They're just simply cops.
Yeah, I mean their police work is synonymous with their vigilante work.
Right.
I would say, but yeah, it's interesting though these covers that they're running because with Angela especially, the bakery just is perpetually not opened yet, right?
Yeah.
Am I misunderstanding that, or is that in fact the case? So it's
just a front.
After a while, you'd think people would start to ask questions, or there's no way I would think that Wade can be available for product, reviews quite as frequently if he's working full time on the police force. But who knows?
It seems like he is.
We've seen
him like 3 or 4 different times. He's doing the Kid cereal, the Mercy perfume.
Yep.
I think there's even another one in there outside of the New York City comeback. So it's just a funny job for this guy to have. He's such an introvert, but he's able to read everybody.
Yes.
Which is a very interesting skill that he has, and obviously that coalesces into his regular day job.
Yeah.
Let's talk about, he goes to the police station, and that's where he has a conversation. First off, before he has the conversation, let's just say it's great that Red Scare is eating a turkey sandwich, and he's having a conversation with Panda, who I would have to make the argument that I am shocked that we didn't see more of Panda in the show when it started.
Agreed, yeah.
I thought we would.
That's the same with Red Scare, though, too.
Yeah.
I thought we would see more of his character.
But it's a great callback because Red Scare is eating the lettuce out of the bag from the very first episode of the show, which also comes back into play within the truck with the lettuce later in the episode.
Yes.
So I just thought it was kind of a, hey, don't forget this lettuce exists. And the reason why this lettuce exists is from that shooting with that cop.
Yep.
I thought it was just an easy way for them to make it fresh in our mind what that lettuce represents.
Totally agree with you.
But we get the Angela stops over and asks if Wade has had any luck finding out what those pills were. And he has not talked to his ex-wife yet because she is, in fact, his ex-wife still. And when people do things for you, it takes time, like when they do favors. By this time, though, he gets called into Lori Blake's office, and Lori Blake asks him what pills. And there she tells him that she has, in fact, bugged the cactus on his desk.
Yes.
Which I thought was the best part of the episode as far as the funniest part. It's just such a throwaway line that, yeah, we bugged your cactus. And thinks nothing of it.
Yeah, for her, it's just business as usual, and it's nothing to even get up in arms about in her perspective.
Yeah.
It's just, that scene was great.
Yeah. Well, let's move forward here. Let's get to the part where Wade does go talk to his ex-wife's name is Cynthia.
I believe, I'd have to double check
but
that.
It's in a cloning facility.
Such an important part of this episode. I glossed over in that rambling recap I did. But yes.
Goes to the cloning facility, talks to his wife, ex-wife, and we learn a couple different things. We learn, that they were married 7 years, 7 years bad luck. We learn that if their dog is not perfectly cloned, she will disintegrate it. So between puppies that don't match and little fetuses, they'd all get killed.
Yeah.
Right? So if you're not a perfect legacy, you get thrown back in the water or put in the incinerator. So interesting commentary on the show that we talked about legacy and eggs so much.
Yes. Very true.
But we find out the pills are what they call nostalgia. They are memories. They pull a little Harry Potter pensive action here.
Yes,
That's the first thing I thought about.
Such a good reference.
The first thing I thought about was Dumbledore pulling the memories out of his brain with his wand, right?
Right.
And I thought that's kind of a neat thing that he's throwing in here. The idea that if for a guy like Will Reeves, who's 105 years old and might start forgetting things, which who knows if he's really forgetting things or not, right? We don't know. We thought he was physically incapacitated. He's not. He can actually perfectly walk fine. We don't know what his mental facility is.
I have a theory on that, and I'd have to go back to make sure I see the finer points, but I would almost guarantee that he wanted Angela to do everything Angela has done, and that he wanted Angela to take his pills and find out what they are and to take them herself.
Okay.
Like I think Will can remember everything just fine. I think that he wants Angela to see these things for herself.
Okay. No, that's fair. And let's come back to that
Sure.
for the recap. But let's talk this EDS stuff. So, at night we get a better understanding of who Wade is. So
Yes.
we get the fact that his ex-wife, makes the argument that she was never going to run away with his clothes. Okay. So let's talk PTSD, because I think that's an extremely important component to who Wade is. Do you think he's suffering PTSD from the woman who stole his clothes? Or is it too obvious that he's just suffering the PTSD from the giant squid monster?
I think it's everything. I think that he intrinsically associates those two events at the same time. Obviously, the woman taking his clothes, and it's very clear he's probably, it looks like a devout Christian of some kind. We don't know the exact denomination necessarily.
Virgin, I believe.
Yes, also that. So, I mean, it's obviously that scene it's uncomfortable to watch. It's clear Wade is uncomfortable in that flashback. So I think that's traumatic for him. But coupled with the fact that then the psychic blast happens within seconds of her running off with his clothes, he, I think, links those two things in the same kind of event. So yeah, PTSD from the entire situation.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I like I said, I think it's the obvious one. It's the squid monster, because what we know, well, I say that, but what we know about his current life is he's clearly concerned with the squid rainfall.
Yes.
And monitors it, tracks it, has studied it. He has those EDS security systems so he can tell when one's coming. He keeps multiple hoods, by the way, in his house.
Yeah, that's right.
He keeps one, it looks like he keeps one upstairs. He keeps one downstairs. Obviously, we talked about the hat with the lined tinfoil in it, or reflecting. What you call it? Reflectine. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not going to call it that.
It's quite a word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But let's talk this through. So he's sitting there eating dinner, and he's watching the American Hero Story for this week's episode.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's I don't know if Hooded Justice is originally supposed to be homosexual, but it's a gay sex scene between two former Minutemen.
Yes, and that is part, I believe, of Hooded Justice's backstory. Like, within the universe of Watchmen as well, where that's kind of something that people talk about. And I have not done this part of the backstory enough justice by trying to research it to see the ins and outs of exactly what's going on with that dynamic, but that is something I think within the world itself, regardless of any meta commentary, within the world of Watchmen itself, that is a plot thread.
I'm wondering if that goes in the face of my argument that I've been trying to make that Will Reeves is Hooded Justice.
I think at this point just about anything's on the table, though, because especially with PD establishing the fact that, well, it's all bullshit, essentially. The fact that the show...
good call.
The show itself is interpreting the events just like any docu-series might try to do to make it more watchable and more enticing.
Bunch of fake news.
At the cost of actual facts. So I think we're supposed to take what we see in American Hero Story with a grain of salt, for sure.
No, that's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up, because I would have totally forgot that conversation with Petey from the last episode. But that's exactly what he says. He's offended by it. He's offended by the American Hero Story. So that's a good call there. But his alarm goes off. And he freaks out and he runs to his bomb shelter. Doesn't grab his hood at first, I don't think. I think he has a hood in the bomb shelter.
I think so, yeah.
And my question is, I'm curious, if it were to be a real event, now the squids only last for seconds, as he says.
Correct.
And they die the entire time. They don't know why they're even here, blah, blah, blah. I wonder how long he stays in the shelter before he comes out.
Yeah, I don't know. It seems like at least an overnight
He's an
kind of
overnight
thing
guy?
for him. Yeah, and the fact that he sleeps with that mask on too. Like he starts with it kind of rolled up on the top of his head, and then you see him pull it down. And oh man, this whole episode's really kind of sad in terms of his character. I think he's a very tragic character.
Okay, why do you think that?
I think unless I'm forgetting something here with the episodes we've established thus far, it seems like, dare I say, he's a pretty good guy compared to some of the other characters that we've been introduced to.
It's funny you say that, because previously you would say, yes, I think he's a good guy. I want to withhold my full disclosure of him because I'm not sure, because I suspect something really foul is going to be coming out of him.
Yes, exactly. And I think we've hit the point now where that turn has taken place, because between just everything from the outset of the episode, how respectful he's trying to be, how cognizant he is of what he's doing for other people, the fact he's leading a self-help group, the fact that, even later on in the episode when he's confronted with the 7th Cavalry, I know I'm jumping ahead a bit here, but I don't think we're supposed to read that scene in any capacity that he's actually known this. I think we're supposed to read his shock and take that at face value, that he's horrified at these realizations that he's coming to, and that he was trying to do the good thing. We learned he actually joined the Force, and I thought this was really interesting, unless my timetable's wrong. He joined the Force after the White Knight occurred.
Correct.
So he has not been doing this for very long.
No.
In that case. So I think he's someone who then knows the risks and joined after that horrible event occurred to try to fight back against injustices.
Where do you think his probability is that he could be a 7th Cavalry member?
Oh, that, like, prior to what we see in this episode?
Sure.
Very non-existent, almost, I would say. Now, granted, there's that one little sliver of doubt, just because this is Watchmen and anything could happen, but I think we're supposed to read that scene when he's captured as probably the first interaction he's having with them, and I think he even calls Keen a liar when he says that Judd had been involved.
Correct.
I think we're supposed to read that at face value. So now he's caught up in it, right? But prior to that, I think he was trying to do the right thing and trying to stop them. So
I do think if you were to make the timeline that he joins after the White Knight, there is a probability that he could be a 7th Cavalry member.
Okay, that's an interesting take on it.
That's why I asked. Now, I'm going to go in the camp to say that he's not, and I think that if he's alive, which I will be on the camp that he is alive, and I actually have a theory how I think that they could do a great escape for him, essentially.
Are we talking Looking Glass?
Yeah.
Still? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I have a great. I'll preface it how I think it would be amazing if they were, because I don't know if we'll see him next episode. I wonder if we'll only see the Angela Abar story next episode, or Sister Night.
I got you. I think it will only be that series of flashbacks. Yeah.
But it'll be interesting, because when we do get to Looking Glass, I'll just go ahead. Well, no, we'll save it to the end. I just think it'd be a really neat theory. But let's move forward to his PTSD group.
Yeah.
And let's talk to that guy who brings up the idea that his mother went through this, and so he then went through it. Or it's basically passed down generationally. It's like a legacy PTSD. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting route for them to take for the show. The fact that these horrible memories, it's something that not only the people that were there to witness the event have to deal with, but unfortunately it's something that their children, and who knows, maybe their children's children would have to deal with as well as and experience these psychic events as if they were there, even though that they weren't.
Well, it's going to be interesting too, because next episode is really going to be a PTSD down memory lane here.
And there's a lot. I don't know how they're going to tie this together, but I know it has to be through somehow the cloning, the psychic blast, all of these events probably converging at some point. But we know that Lady True's daughter, or who we think is probably her clone,
she's got to be.
Yeah, is also experiencing these things, though, remember, as well. That's also, it seems like Lady True's memories, or possibly even maybe her mother or grandmother, we don't know. Those memories are being passed down to her as well. And now we hear that this, from the psychic event in New York that supposedly took place, it's being passed down as well. And there's got to be more there. I don't see why they would introduce those two separate incidents and not have them have a larger implication. So,
okay. He meets a lady in this meeting. She comes in a little bit late. Her name is Renee. She's played by Paula McColmson from Ray Donovan, Trixie from Deadwood. She's in the 3rd season of Sons of Anarchy as the Irish Gemma, essentially. And they kind of end up going to a bar, just kind of move the story along. She clearly hits on him. She flirts with him. She talks about how she is a radiologist.
Yes, that's right.
That she herself has her own PTSD. And she essentially, you maybe think that she's interested in him. And kisses him. And her ride shows up. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because you think about fate sometimes and stuff like this, and he's a guy that seems kind of stubborn. Had he just drove himself home, maybe he doesn't see this truck come. And so we don't know where we're at that point. But he waits. Her ride comes, which is a very odd situation, I would think, just in real time. If you're meeting a lady at the bar, and her ride, she's going to go call a ride into another guy in a pickup truck. Odd story.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe, I don't know, maybe not. But she gets in a pickup truck, and this pickup truck drives away, hits a speed bump, and out pops a head of lettuce. What did you think when you saw that?
Yeah, I was suspicious of this.
Of her?
Not initially necessarily.
Okay.
But from that moment, as soon as the truck pulls up with the tarp over the back of it, I was like, oh, is this? And then it hits the speed bump. Like, okay. What I didn't know how to take right away is how coincidental that seemed. And then later on, we find out that they did stage this. So that actually made a little bit more sense. I'm like, why, if you are a known high-profile criminal because you shot a cop, why would you still be driving with the same lettuce in the back of your pickup? So the fact that this was intentional at least made a little bit more sense after we figured that out.
Right.
Yeah.
So he tracks him to a mall, and he thinks he's radioing for help. He's not.
Right.
They have basically hijacked his frequency. We'll find that out. Mm-hmm. You see both Renee and the unknown gentleman put on the Rorschach masks before they get out of their truck and walk straight into the mall. Mm-hmm. He goes to the car. He finds a gun, which I'm kind of shocked that he doesn't have his own gun on him at this point.
Yeah, it makes it seem like, now granted, I guess with Angela, we know she's got firearms, hidden in her house.
Correct.
So I don't know if, Angela is essentially doing something illegal by having that, because the fact that Looking Glass, someone who clearly has his own bunker, like you think this man would have a firearm. And granted, maybe he does have them at his house, and he just didn't have one on him at the time because he wasn't on duty. So he might not have had a firearm.
Think of this take, though. Here's an interesting thing. They both suffer from two separate PTSD incidences. He suffers from that squid monster.
Right.
She suffers from an actual violent attack on herself. Her weapons are hidden throughout her house. His masks are hidden throughout his house.
Ooh.
And
good analysis.
That's an interesting thing. So what scares him is not somebody shooting him, because he's not scared of that. He doesn't have a gun. He doesn't carry body armor. She's constantly wearing body armor. She's constantly got guns hidden. Like that's what she's afraid of. Mm-hmm. I do find it odd him just being a cop in general, unless he's just trying to abide by laws that they exist at Tulsa that you can't drink and have a gun on you, which is possible. It's just interesting because this is a show that does suspend some reality of no internet, no cell phones or whatever it is. So whatever.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess the way I read that is this: he was off duty. He'd gone out to have a drink.
Could be.
Then he wasn't anticipating to have to follow them back to the 7th Cavalry headquarters, so he just wasn't armed at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Finds the gun, the revolver.
Yep.
And finds the lettuce. Tracks them into the mall. Go ahead.
What does he pull out of the back? Okay.
I have no idea what he pulls out of the back of the truck.
Okay.
I did not. I watched it once. I didn't catch it. I didn't go back and rewatch this episode yet, so I'm not exactly sure. I was hoping you would actually know.
No, I didn't. I need to go back and just freeze frame it to see if it's gasoline or who knows.
Yeah. You know what would be funny? I don't know if it is. It's in a box, right? It'd be funny if it's like basketball pumps. So I know that's a stretch of a thing, and people might be like, "What are you talking about?"
Where are you going with this right now?
Yeah, I think it would be really funny here. So let's talk about, he sees them throwing a basketball, or basketball just appears out of nowhere.
Yeah, he just...
Well, I'm sorry. Let me backtrack this. I apologize. He finds the church. And let's go back to before this, earlier in the episode, that there is a scene where Laurie Blake, we glossed over this, holds the same type of meeting Judd Crawford held. and basically says it's time that we find the 7th Cavalry. We don't need to know who they are. We need to know where they're at. Let's locate this church.
Yes.
Okay. So
Great point.
He locates the church. Obviously, it's a like a kind of a put together wooden frame for looks, not really holding church. Obviously, it's just for filming.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is
It's
interesting.
Kind of
It's
a mock
it's all
church, essentially.
scenery.
Yeah.
And he tracks him to they're throwing basketball hoops into this field generator thing. Now he knows exactly what the generator is, or this machine is. I can't remember the name of it. I did not write this down.
Yeah,
but he clearly knows what it is. It
the
scares
model
him.
of it and everything.
Scares him.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he pulls out the gun. At which point we find out that the gun is filled with blanks as he tries to shoot people. Renee pulls off her mask and said, "Good thing this worked. We no one's coming. There's no help coming for you. We planned this. We planned the head of lettuce to rig to fall off the truck. We wanted you to be here." They take him, they hold him, they handcuff him essentially, and he meets Senator Joe Keene.
Yes, indeed.
Who he knows exactly who he is.
Yes.
When he sits down. Confirming a theory that we've had, and I think many people had, it's not a hot take, that he was a white supremacist cavalry member from the beginning. But what's interesting is he drops a little bit of information for us. He said that after the White Night is when he came to Tulsa to control these people. And he struck a deal with Judd Crawford that he would control his people, and that Joe Keene would control the 7th Cavalry.
That's right.
And it would prevent violence from taking place. Now, I've made the argument that Judd Crawford is not a 7th Cavalry member and that was his dad's robes. Do you buy that, or do you think that this confirms that he actually, in fact, was a 7th Cavalry member?
I don't think it confirms yet that he's actually a 7th Cavalry member in terms of him going so far as to, drinking the same Kool-Aid they're drinking and wearing a Rorschach mask.
He's part of the conspiracy.
Clearly, he's part of the conspiracy. Yes, so I want to make that distinction clear. But if you're talking about, is he otherwise donning the Rorschach mask and going to their meetings, I do not think that. No. I think he's caught up in everything. That's really inarguable. But I don't think he's a 7th Cavalry member in the strictest sense.
So question here.
Yeah.
When this show starts, Judd Crawford's still alive. Joe Keene is still arguably in control of his people. They break the peace, though, before the show even starts. Like, as the show starts, they break peace. Do we know why they break peace?
I don't think we're really given a definitive answer on that. I mean, I'm assuming you're referring to the opening scene where the
cop.
Rorschach.
Yep.
Yeah, the 7th Cavalry member shoots the cop.
Correct.
Yeah. Outside of just the motivation of this random guy wanting to shoot a cop, we haven't been provided with any additional clarification at this point. We don't know if it was truly a seemingly random act and this 7th Cavalry member just decided to do that, or maybe the 7th Cavalry member was given instruction that if he is pulled over,
right,
or whatever the case may be, that he is to incite this incident.
Sure.
We don't have confirmation either way on that.
What did you think of their conversation?
I thought it was very enlightening. I think in terms of the nuance that you were looking for, I think we're starting to get some of that now, because it's, once again, it's this bigger picture, though. So very clearly that we now have portals, and very clearly that we now directly have an explanation from Veidt himself via video, essentially, of what the master plan was. There's something bigger going on here, and that's why I think Keene, as he mentioned, is kind of controlling this group of 7th Cavalry members. So it's not just cavalry versus cops. Like, there's a bigger scenario happening here, and that we're watching it unfold. But I thought it was very illuminatory, you could say, on the events. It obviously puts things in motion from there in terms of Looking Glass having to make a decision whether he's going to betray his friends or whether he's going to watch them, essentially, or rather allow them to be murdered. So
sure,
it definitely puts him in a tough spot to try and decide what the right thing to do is in that circumstance.
I think the thing with Joe Keene, and I think what he illustrates, is he represents systematic racism. Mm-hmm. From the comic book, his father, I think it was, his father or his grandfather did the Keene Act, which originally outlaws vigilantes.
Correct.
He is part of the, top 1%, white power, clearly, but he's also part of, legacy. He represents legacy. And I think that him being a part of the 7th Cavalry, that I don't think they just let people join them. So when he says he came to Tulsa to clean up their act, it makes me think that he's clearly part of a white supremacy somewhat organization, or white privilege, or white supremacy, or maybe it's one and the same. I don't know. That he's part of that type of a position elsewhere, with influence. And so he comes to clean them up. Again, I'm hoping Damon Lindelof gives us the answer of why Tulsa, Oklahoma over everything, because everybody's coming from outside for the most part and landing in Tulsa. Up to including Sister Knight, who's from Vietnam, right? So everybody's from somewhere else but Wade, which makes it such a great episode for him.
Yeah, very true.
Anyways, he talks about this this video. He wants him to watch this video because it will free him.
Yes, exactly.
What did you think before this video is? Did you have an idea of what this video would show?
I was hoping it was Veidt.
Oh, did you really think that?
I was hoping it would be Veidt. I didn't necessarily know if they would do that, because I'm surprised that they just let him, I guess, rattle off everything that he did in terms of explaining the fact that this is actually from the future and he's in the past, and he orchestrated Robert Redford being elected president and all this kind of stuff.
So great.
Yeah, Jeremy Irons does such a good job in this show. So that's partially why I was hoping it was Veidt. It would be something pertaining to his character.
So I thought it would be Judd Crawford.
Oh yeah, that would be good too.
I just thought it would be a video message from him or some kind of interview with him.
Sure.
Explaining his side of the story.
Yeah. I get the reason why Veidt, it's not like long before that moment I thought maybe Veidt would have a role to play there. It's just strictly because when we do know what Wade's going through PTSD-wise and how Keen says that this will set him free, I'm like, I'll bet it's related to the portals, and then that made me think of Veidt.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay. So we get the video. It is Veidt.
Yep.
And he's basically doing this video to President Redford. What's funny, though, is that Keen only gets this video because he gets the Appropriations Committee or whatever committee he doesn't want.
Yes.
He gets the lower committee, and somehow he gets this video. So that was really interesting. I like that idea of a circumstance that he just happens to get what he doesn't want, and in turn gets this great piece of information. Veidt basically says that he's clearly afraid of, he's afraid of nuclear war. Everybody's afraid of something in the show.
Right.
And that's his fear. And it's funny too, because I don't know, I'm sure that there's been a million ways to look at Veidt's character about how he's supposed to arguably have super intelligence. I know that in the movie they made him out to be not only super intelligent, but also extremely fast and strong.
Yeah.
As he's able to obviously whoop the comedian and everybody else. But you have to admit, the irony here is that this guy is so incredibly smart compared to everybody else, at least that's what we're supposed to believe. He probably fears stupid people with nuclear bombs that he can't stop. Right?
Yes.
I mean, has to be a very rational fear of his that he's living in a world full of just completely irrational people that are not on his level. Mm-hmm. So like I said, I like that the show plays off that everybody fears something. And he does this message to Robert Redford, who's president or will be president.
Yes.
And basically says that, hey, I'm setting this up. This isn't real, or this is real. That's what I couldn't understand. And again, I need to rewatch it. Is the squid monster real?
Yeah, so the squid monster is real, but the interdimensional portal side of it, the fact that this is an alien life form, is the hoax, is my understanding. So this is where I need to go back and brush up on my original Watchmen comic knowledge also, because is that the same? And listeners, please sound off in our comments, send us an email, let us know, because I need my memory refreshed on how that original event occurred also. But in this video, specifically, that part is the hoax, that it was him behind it, which that's from the original comics too.
Right.
We know Veidt's behind it and orchestrated this.
Correct.
But he makes it seem like this is not an interplanetary, interdimensional event. It's just him having created a portal, creating then a squid monster and sending it
and then
through.
He's perpetuating the squid rainfall.
That was my interpretation as well.
Yes, because he has to keep them believing that this is a possibility.
Exactly. Yes.
Keep them in fear.
Exactly.
And thought that was a great video. We circle back around from that time. He goes back to the police station, I believe, at this point.
Yes, this is after he's kind of given the ultimatum, I guess you could say, by Keen, where either he can help Lori investigate Angela and essentially lead to her arrest so that Angela is off Keen's back, or he'll just send his own guys to do it and shoot up her whole house.
Yes.
So obviously we know which side Looking Glass lands on.
So yeah, he gets her. He basically says that what these pills are and who they belong to. And she admits that her grandfather owns the pills.
Yep.
Will Reeves. She admits that her grandfather, she doesn't believe he killed Judd Crawford, but that he was there the night that he killed Judd Crawford, or somebody killed Judd Crawford, and that she covered it up. When Lori Blake runs out of the office ready to arrest her, we figure out that she's now clearly knows that she was screwed by Looking Glass and the cactus. She swallows all of the nostalgia pills.
Yeah.
And that's going to be great for next week's episode. Looking Glass doesn't have any friends, but he arguably just betrayed his only friend.
Agreed. Angela, I think, is the only person up to this point that we're led to believe he at least has mutual respect for. Would be the closest thing he probably has to a friend.
I'm wondering
so that makes this betrayal even worse.
Yeah, I'm wondering if they'll show, because I said this to you earlier. I liked it when he pulls his mask back down. You see the red glare of Red Scare right off the side of his mask.
Yes.
I'm curious if they'll show any reaction between those guys in the coming episode of like, why did you do that? What are you doing? Stuff like that. Because even though we get a full Looking Glass episode, we got a full Lori Blake episode, we get Sister Night episode, I do not for 1 second believe we're getting a Red Scare episode.
I don't either. No
I
way.
don't believe we're getting a Pirate Jenny episode either, which is kind of odd because I figured they would actually be bigger characters. But Wade ends up going home that night. He takes his hat off because he doesn't need to fear it anymore. He finds the new EDS alarm that he destroyed back on his front porch.
Yeah.
He goes to throw it away. He walks back over and grabs it, takes it back in the house, and when that happens, a van pulls up with 4 7th Cavalry members that get out with shotguns, and they go into his house. Do you think that they'll kill Looking Glass?
Unfortunately, yes, I do. Because I think this is going to be a catalyst that launches the next set of investigations. And I also think that, to a large degree, he has gone through... It's largely due to this episode. He's gone through his biggest arc. The fact that he actually, more or less, I get he goes back for the EDS alarm, but he's more or less realized the truth. He's probably starting to. It's not a light switch. He can't just turn off his fear, but he's realized what that fear has stemmed from. So, I don't know. It tied up a lot for his character, and if they need the next series of investigations to bring Angela and Lori back together after what will clearly be a conflict-heavy episode for them, I could see them using Looking Glass's death to do that.
Let me give you my theory on how they don't kill him.
Okay.
This would be great. I think that he has enough time to get into his house and pull his new alarm out of the box. I think the alarm goes off, and I think we get a squid rainfall.
All right.
I think that triggers him to run out the back door to run into his bunker and locks the door. And survives. That they don't get in there to shoot him. That's what I'm assuming. I would think it would be a great Damon Lindelof thing for him to, as he goes back to get the alarm, he gets the alarm in the house, he pulls it out of the box, and the alarm goes off because it starts raining squids. Triggers him to sprint like he does, out the back door where they're going in through the garage. They don't see him. He gets to his bunker, locks himself in there. It would be a very Lindelof lost thing for him to do, to barely narrowly escape, to be that kind of like tie it back together.
Right.
Now, who knows? He probably gets shot 4 times with a shotgun and we don't see him.
I hope you're right. I love that. I love the fact that he wouldn't have even then known that that they'd sent 7th Cavalry members after him.
Yeah.
That he's just sprinting to get to his safe house,
Yeah,
essentially.
but
So I love that.
To make it actually rain, though, would be a great
Yes.
thing because we know he's scared of it. We know he's tracking it. We've only seen it done once. It comes at different times. We know that clearly by Veidt's calculation, this thing is going to continue to go. It would just be great for him to pull it right out of the box just in time.
Right.
And it triggers.
Along that thought process, now I don't think this theory I just had will actually happen, but I think it'd be really cool. We also don't see him necessarily being hugely competent in combat. I believe that he can use a firearm, don't get me wrong.
We've never seen him hand-to-hand,
We've never
though.
seen him hand-to-hand or anything like that. But that being said, how cool would it be if he actually does hear them coming in and they have this fight that spills out into the squid rainfall and he doesn't have his mask, he doesn't have his hat,
Yes.
and it's him like directly confronting this without being in the bunker.
That'd be great.
Like I hope that happens actually, because
Yeah.
then I want him to survive.
I think the problem is I don't think... Now, granted, this goes back to the argument we have to have with Lindelof is, do we know if this is a second season? If there's a second season, I don't think you would kill off Looking Glass because he's arguably the third main character of this show.
Yeah.
If there's not a second season, it would make sense that you would kill this guy off now, like you said, because his arc is done. you can now use him as the catalyst for the next 4 episodes. I just think that that's the answer that needs to be had is, are we doing a second season? And if we are, I don't believe Looking Glass is dead. I believe he has plot armor. Unless all of a sudden we're going to get a new character, because Red Scare is not going to jump into a main spot. Pirate Jenny, I don't think would jump into a main spot.
I agree.
And you don't really have much else unless it's just going to be Angela and Lori. And I don't think a character as strong as Looking Glass in this show, for what he represents as like a Rorschach stand-in with his mask, they're going to kill him off.
Okay. Yeah.
I think can I say he's too cool to kill off? Like, as far as a character goes, that maybe he's too likable.
Right.
That this mask itself is so neat and cool as a thing of the show that, like, kind of like Rorschach's was back in the movie and the comic, it's not worth killing him off until, like, maybe the end.
Yeah.
Don't kill him off mid-season.
Right. I get where you're coming. I hope you are correct, by the way. Sure. Looking Glass, as we've talked about, and you can all probably tell, he's one of my favorite characters. So, of course, I don't want him to die. I could just...
Yes, you do. You are wanting him dead.
No, playing to the opposite, I could also see the reason why they would choose to do so.
Sure.
If they wanted to.
Yeah. Give me some Adrian Veidt.
Oh, gosh. Adrian Veidt. So we finally realize what's on the other side of the atmosphere.
Yes.
It's not really atmosphere, though. It seems like this is also a... Did you read this as a portal, or is it just a force field? That is.
I read it as it's like... I don't want to say... it's like a dimension.
Yeah.
But the dimension's on the moon.
But yes, well, and I think he's... Gosh, was that Jupiter? I think. So to back up a second, sorry. He himself has donned the rather archaic-looking scuba-style suit that's actually more of an astronaut kind of suit, right? He himself hops up into the catapult, and he has Ms. Crookshanks fire him through the atmosphere, through the portal, or wherever. And he lands on the opposite side. And yes, I was double checking on this. I think it's Jupiter that we see in the distance, in the background. I think it might be one of the moons of Jupiter, possibly, that he is on. So it is a moon, but I don't think it's Earth that's close by. I think that might be Jupiter there. But anyway, in this barren, desolate landscape are all of the former clones that he has been launching through this portal, through the atmosphere, whatever you want to call it, for the past few episodes. And he ends up, very disturbingly, breaking their bodies apart. And
which was great. I love it. I love that we've seen him do that multiple times now. When the bodies are frozen, he just starts stomping on them and tearing them apart.
Yes. And then he turns them into essentially an SOS. And it works. At least we can assume it will probably work, because as he finishes making this message out of all of these bodies, a satellite rotates around in orbit, and it makes it look, we assume, that it sees his message. And then he is pulled back from this other portal, and we actually get to meet the Game Warden.
Yes.
Which is pretty cool. Now, you had an interesting theory on this. Who do you think the Warden is?
I think the Game Warden is... And I have to go back and look at it still. I think it's Mr. Phillips.
Okay, yeah.
I think it's the butler. I think that the butler is a stand-in for when we see... we'll see some form of a look back on Dr. Manhattan, and it's going to be this guy.
Okay.
And we might not even realize we're looking at Dr. Manhattan. It would be ironic, because you make the argument, we don't know if we've been looking at Dr. Manhattan at all during this time period.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, they could definitely pull something like that on. It's like, oh, he was there the whole time.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it'll be interesting. I don't know. I didn't read that at all. I have no idea who this would possibly be. I didn't think it was Mr. Phillips at the time.
Correct.
I thought it was a new character at this point. Now that we did get to see him up close, the fact that he had the mask on, the mustache, actually reminded me very much of kind of a Zorro character, or like an Errol Flynn, you know, Robin Hood, swashbuckler kind of guy. But yeah, I just read it as he's the Game Warden. He's a new character, essentially. But it'll be interesting to see how they tie all that together. But they do conclude the sequence with Veidt this week by him being knocked out, essentially. The Game Warden is clearly going to punish him in some capacity.
What do you expect from him? What do you think happens to him? Like, when he gets knocked out, what are you thinking?
I think that the Warden's going to take him back to wherever the Warden calls home.
Oh, okay.
And I think that we're probably going to see beyond the facade at this point. So he's called this place, at first it was a paradise, now it's a prison. So I think we're going to see something outside of this. Very clearly, the atmosphere, if you want to call it that, leads to either it's to the moon via portal, or literally this is just a force field of some kind that's already on that moon, that once he escapes it, he's out on the desolate actual moon landscape. But I think we're going to get to see kind of behind the curtain a little bit.
Okay. Let's talk next episode. Angela takes all the nostalgia pills.
Yes.
We've talked about in the last episode how they've kind of gone away from the racial component of the show. Even though this was a much heavier 7th Cavalry episode, again, it's not 7th Cavalry in the sense of racism that they try to make it out to be in the first couple episodes. You know, it's really, who knows what they're really wanting. Obviously, in the preview, we're going back into like Tulsa, Oklahoma, the race riots, probably the Judd Crawford situation. We'll probably see his actual death, I'm thinking, in this next episode.
Oh, yeah, good call. I bet we will.
And I think we'll get a lot more of the story of her grandfather and probably her father. Maybe even find out who the second family member is that the unnamed sibling or whatever it is that we don't know yet from her family tree.
Be very interesting.
Anything that you're expecting out of that episode?
I think we're going to get more history with the cloning, too.
Okay.
I think they're going to weave that in there somehow, because that now recently has become a very big through line. It's always been there with Veidt after we get that reveal in episode 2 possibly is when that first reveal was that Ms. Crookshank and Mr. Phillips are clones.
Yeah.
But now that we've had a couple episodes, we've had Lady True, we've had in this most recent episode with Looking Glass's ex-wife in the cloning facility. Yes. So I think we're going to see through Will's memories more of this cloning backstory.
I don't think we saw a cake in this episode, did we?
I was looking for it.
I don't think we saw it either.
Which I was kind of... This is such a nitpicky complaint, but I was kind of disappointed. I love that there's been a cake, at least in some capacity, in the other 4 episodes. I was kind of hoping there'd be one in this, too.
I agree. Anything to add to end this episode with?
No, I don't think so. This, I will say, I guess, I know last week we had discussed that if we haven't been covering the series, would I be watching this in real time, essentially, as it releases?
Right.
And this most recent episode really rekindled everything that I do love about this show. So I'm very excited for next week's episode.
Yeah.
Really enjoyed this week's episode as well.
Well, and I am too. And I'll tell you, I know that Joe and I do a second podcast called Aliens and Cowboys. And I know that we were supposed to put one out last week. We did not. We apologize for that. We will be doing that particular podcast every other week until Watchmen ends.
Correct.
So that way we'll go back to one podcast a week. But we do want to thank you guys for subscribing to the Watchmen for Nixon podcast. We really enjoyed this one. We're going to keep this one going. We really hope they do a second season.
Yeah, definitely.
But like I said, if you like what you hear, let us know. We're on Twitter at Alien and Cowboy. You can get to us on Gmail at aliensandcowboys@gmail.com. You can go out there, give us a 5-star rating, leave us a review, let us know what you think, what we're doing good at, what we're not doing good at. Do you have any theories? Do you think we're way off on our theories? What evidence do you have? Stuff like that. Join us this Wednesday. We are going to get together for Aliens and Cowboys with a couple of our other guest hosts. We're going to hit The Mandalorian hard. We're going to hit Disney Plus hard.
Yep.
And you just kind of spend about an hour and a half talking about that with a couple different people. So, other than that, I know that we didn't sign off last week with cheers.
We did not.
I thought it was so odd. First time ever
Yeah.
that Joe told me after I ended, I didn't say cheers, so apologies for that. But other than that, I don't have anything to add.
I do not either.
So we'll see you guys Wednesday if you want to join us. If not, we'll see you next week for the Watchmen for Nixon podcast. Cheers.
Cheers.